أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. These are the Ramadan Daily Quran Studies for the year 2025, written by Zahid Aziz and produced by Ahmadiyya Anjuman Ishaat Islam, Lahore, UK. Study 15.
Prophet Muhammad ﷺ granted Kauthar or abundance of good. Allah said to the Holy Prophet Muhammad in the Quran,
إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ إِنَّ شَانِئَكَ هُوَ الْأَبْتَرُ.
Surely we have given you, O Prophet, abundance of good. So pray to your Lord and sacrifice. Surely your enemy is cut off from good. Chapter 108. This is a very early revelation addressed to the Holy Prophet. Like chapter 94 discussed in the last study, this also was revealed when the Holy Prophet possessed nothing and was entirely helpless. Verse 1. Abundance of good. This verse states in the most certain and powerful terms that God has granted the Holy Prophet Muhammad al-Kauthar, which means the abundance, or, in fact here, the abundance of good. The abundance of good which God gave to the Holy Prophet was that he was promised the triumph of Islam and granted help against his enemies and support from God for his community for all time. In fact, he was granted so much of goodness of all kinds that it cannot be counted. It was bestowed upon him in the greatest measure, not granted to anyone before or after him. Some of the things he was granted abundantly were both spiritual and worldly rule over a nation, honor and renown, devotion from his followers, and the highest of morals. And the prophecy that he would be granted all of this was made when he started his mission, was alone and helpless, and there was no visible prospect that he would make any headway at all. Verse 2. To pray and to sacrifice. This makes it clear that it is not the Holy Prophet alone who is promised this abundance of good, but also every true follower of his, who makes use of the means for the attainment of it. Two ways to attain the abundance of good promised in verse 1 are praying to God and sacrifice, which means the devoting of one's life to the good of humanity. Prayer is to be in contact with God, which raises in a person's heart the highest aspirations and makes him focus deeply on the attributes of God, which become his model to follow. If there is no aspiration for good, it is simply impossible to do good. Hence prayer is mentioned first. And when these noble aspirations arise, a person should be willing to give or sacrifice his whole life for the service of humanity. This is not service of one group or one nation or one community, but humanity itself. The Holy Prophet's life was a perfect example of prayer and sacrifice. As the following verse shows, his prayers and sacrifice occupied his entire life up to his death. He is instructed in the Quran to declare to the world,
قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ.
My prayer and my sacrifice and my life and my death are surely for Allah, the Lord of the worlds, no partner has He. And this am I commanded, and I am the first of those who submit. Chapter 6, verse 162 to 163. Through such a life, he becomes the first and foremost of those who submit to God, the one who is ahead of everyone else in submitting to God. This is the highest rank of being a Muslim. Prayer and sacrifice are mutually bound together. When we utter the first takbir of prayer, we cut off all worldly connections like an animal ready to be sacrificed. For the prayer, we sacrifice our time, our desire to do other things, and even a little of our earning and livelihood. Prayer to be perfect requires sacrifice, and sacrifice to be perfect requires prayer. Once the prayer is over, it can only be perfect if we make sacrifices during our daily activities. Otherwise, we are merely uttering words of service to God in prayer and not carrying them out in practice. Similarly, perfect sacrifice requires prayer to ask God that one's actions of sacrifice may be accepted. These can only be accepted if the sacrifice was sincere and not for show, nor for name and fame, nor for some other personal motive. Verse 3. Surely your enemy is cut off from good. The word for cut off is abdar. It means a person or people from whom all good is cut off. They leave behind no good mention of them. There is no one to take their place, continue their work, or follow their example. It is also applied to a person who leaves behind no offspring or successor. This verse refuted the allegations of the opponents of the Holy Prophet that he, as he had no male offspring, his name and mission would come to an end after him. The verse contains a prophecy that it is his enemy who would be cut off and leave no successor to continue their name or work. The Holy Prophet would be blessed with spiritual progeny to the day of judgment, as he has been granted abundance of good. He is Al-Kauthar and is not Abdar. This, of course, proves true during the life of the Holy Prophet, when the next generation, who were descendants from his enemies, did not follow in their father's footsteps, but instead became Muslims. The spiritual progeny of the Holy Prophet continues to exist till now, and if they work to present a true picture of Islam and its Prophet to the world, then the next generation of the present-day opponents of Islam might become admirers and well-wishers of Islam. End of study 15.
Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-Azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jiwadun karimun malikun barurur rahim.